this video, I'm gonna be going over how to make a coil pot, which basically looks like this, and where you stack coils and attach them together to form a cylindrical vessel. Okay. So there's few methods you can start with, but I'm going to show you the slab bottom one. Some people like to pinch a bottom and start laying the coils on top from there, so that's also an option to you. And then another fun bottom I've seen is to roll the coil as a bottom and then continue up. So that's another option too. But we'll do the slab for this. I like the slab in that I can control really the size of the bottom, and this is basically 3.5 inches. So 3.5 to 4 inches is a good size to start with. So we're gonna go with that, but I'm gonna sponge it down, keep it moist until we get to this, and I'll show you the coil rolling process, which can be difficult. I'm not a fan of rolling coils, but it is a useful skill to have in making different objects. So basically I like to start with a ball of clay that I kind of stretch out into a sausage. That's what I see a lot referenced. So just like pinch it out to a thicker rope, and then you can give it a gentle twist, which helps when you kind of roll it. When you roll, you want to make sure that you're going all the way around the circumference of the material. So you kind of want to have a good clear surface, and of course with any tabletop you want to make sure you don't have any little crusties laying there that's going to get picked up with the clay that you're rolling. But try to go all the way, and then this is still a little thick, so I like to kind of roll it in my hands, rotate it, roll it in my hands, and work the center, and kind of also hold it up vertically, using gravity, kind of work my way. And same thing, just as you're rolling on a tabletop, kind of want to make sure you use the whole palm of your hands and fingers and that whole surface to roll all the way across, so you're not just rolling it in one spot, because then you'll get this a flatter coil, which, I mean, some people like the flatter coil, so it's definitely a preference, but being able to roll a nice coil is a good skill to have. So basically just keep working your way, and same thing as a cooking and rolling dough. You kind of want to start from the center and work your way to the outside. I've also seen some people use their forearms kind of to roll, and so you can try whatever you want. It's interesting, but I've heard that for some people this is how they can get a really nice coil, and because depending on how much pressure you're giving the coil, you can definitely start to get this like oval shape. But then you can kind of adjust it with your fingers and then continue rolling. But when I get the coil, more you work on it, it's gonna start to dry out. So I like to have just a wet sponge nearby and just brush it, kind of get rid of the cracks. Careful, if you wet it too much, it's going to stick to whatever surface you're working with, unless you have canvas or newspaper laid out. But I already have a few coils here that I've rolled out, and I like to also give it a little sponge, keep it moist. Or I use pieces of newspaper that I've lightly kind of dipped or sponged with water, and then lay it over the coils that I've prepared. So that's another way. But let's see. That's kind of basically what I like to do is when I get to a decent length, I cut it in half because the coil will keep stretching, and I have limited workspace, and it's easier to control your coils when it's about, you know, an arm's length. It's really hard when it's longer than that. So when it comes to like a smaller diameter, I cut it into sections and then continue rolling those into, and you can kind of see, one, and this is very common thing where the basically outside parts of your clay starts spreading out. When this happened, I just cut the ends off. It's easier than trying to manage not having that, so just chop it off. It's fine. And for a smaller pinch pot, I like to roll the coils to about the size of, I guess, a pencil, maybe a tad thicker. You don't want to work too thick for a smaller pot because, well, then you just have a really unbalanced pot for your size with huge coils. But don't make your coils too thin, because then it's going to take a lot of coils to bring the pot to the height you want. And I'm going to cut the stretched ends off again. And then this is a little long for me, but important part of layering the coil pot is you kind of want the ends to taper so that you have a nice balancing way for the coil to come back onto itself. Or another method is that you can roll coils out to the exact circumference, basically, almost a little longer than your bottom. So I'll show you with this piece. And also, for the first layer, it might be nice to have a little bit thicker start bottom that you can really work to attach the coil. So, let's see, should be able to see that. Move my coil. Sponge my slab, give it a little moisture. I'm going to just score the outer edge. And also making coils, if you use a Lazy Susan, something that turns, or smaller newspaper that you can rotate, it does speed up the process. And then if your clay coils are nice and soft and wet, then you don't need to score every coil attachment. You can kind of attach with pressure, but because of the size of these coils, they like to dry out, so I just like to give it a light score. And you can use slip with a little brush, or I just like to give it a little wet wipe down with my sponge, and it kind of creates that slurry glue. And I can see. And you don't want to use too much water, because then your coils are going to be just sliding all over the place. Hold one end down, okay? Kind of want to hold the sides of the coil and press down. I don't like pressing from the top because it really flattens out the coils. And visually, when your pot's finished, it just doesn't look like the coil's held its shape, and it loses that. But if you have something that turns, then you can just rotate, press, wiggle a little bit to see if it's attached. If you slip and score, that's like a really good way to know that something's attached, is you just give it a little wiggle, and you'll be able to feel when it's definitely connected. Okay, so here I came back to the end, and this is the part where I like to have a even start. You can see I just basically give a little, lay the top over the beginning part and cut diagonally into both of the coils, okay? And pull the excess off and lift up on the end, and then pop off the beginning part. So if you want to do this method, it might be good not to slip and score the beginning part of the attachment. And I'm going to score that and give it a little slip. You want to score the ends right there. So now it has a angle that it can meet at, and then you can smooth it on to itself and each other and get rid of that cut and seam. So there we have one layer this. The bottom circumference was 3.5 inch, so I think I'm gonna make this 3.5 inch tall. And maybe I could go up depending on how much coil I have, but so that's the start. Okay, and if you feel like it's getting a little hard, give it a little sponge, keep it moist. If you want to clean up this inside part, especially if you want to smooth out the inside, it's always nice to kind of work your way up with the smoothing, because after you lay all the coils, and if you want to smooth the inside, it does get a little difficult to get in to the bottom parts of the pot, depending on how tall you're trying to make it. But if you're trying to make a taller coil pot, then you definitely want to work as you lay the coils. So I can just like kind of press down. And another thing I can do to kind of fill this gap right here is I could roll a lot skinnier coil than this. I can go and this is the case with kind of anything you want to fill the gaps on. Like even for like a slab bill pot, and you have the corners where the clay slabs meet, and you want to round that out because you want to prevent like little chunks of food from getting in there. It just makes it easier to clean, yada yada. Then you can take a smaller coil. This is, and I'll just wet the inside lightly, and I like my serrated rib because it speeds up the process, but give it a light score all the way around, and then I can tuck and press and lay my skinny coil into that gap on the very bottom, and pinch that off, and then smooth that out. And then now I have a rounded, nice curve that bridges the coil in the bottom. Smooth that out just like that. Boom. That looks good. Okay, and so there's that. And then we can continue on to laying another coil, and also you can use a sponge and kind of wet your coil down and stretch, without tearing. You can kind of stretch and lightly pinch the ends to get a nice taper. I'm gonna score this lightly again, and I know most of you don't have a serrated rib, but if you have like a credit card, you can easily make a serrated rib by just cutting little zigzags with a scissor, and then like, you know, you can make one side a finer tooth and another rougher tooth, however works. And then that way all you have to do is pull it across once for different things to actually score it. It's a nice, quick, easy way to do it. Okay, so give it a swirl right there, little score. When you have a long piece, just want to hold it up and then press, same way, attach in between your thumb. And keep an eye on where you're laying the coils on top. Is it more on the inside? Is it more on the outside? Trying to control how you want to taper out or taper in. It's always safer to taper in, and then you can kind of work your way out to stretch the clay into a more cylindrical form, rather than trying to make or like do a more cylindrical and then go out, because if you try to start laying things out, gravity does a lot of work to weaken the structure, especially when the clay is wet. Okay, so I've kind of come all the way around, so I'm gonna score again and continue pressing. And there's, this coil is not a perfect thickness coil, so some parts of it's a little thinner than others, some parts a little thicker, so I kind of gauge where that is, and on the thicker parts I'm kind of giving a little bit more pressure so the clay kind of squeezes upward and help with the height of that. And then came all the way around, so here I'm gonna score, and you notice like I'm not sponging every time. As long as I can feel that it's on there, when I give a little tug, then I can just continue without having to slip and make it all slimy. But so there's that we got going, and before I put another layer, I'm gonna smooth out the inside of my coil and continue rotating and rotating. So you can use your thumb to smooth the inside, or if you want, you can use your modeling tool, wooden knife. It comes in your toolkit, and use the back end has a little curve to it, so you can use that to pull up or press down, however way you want to adjust your way you want to smooth your coils out, whatever works for you. But I like doing up and down sometimes. I like doing the diagonal, and then if I do a diagonal, then I come and do another pull, and kind of working in multiple directions helps fill those little crevices and gap. If there's just like a huge gap, you can roll more tiny little skinny coils like this and fill it in too. So you do have options. But here's the inside getting really smooth. And when you're pressing on the inside of the clay, support it with your other hand so that you're not just stretching the clay out. And you also have, this, and that you need to get in a little bit more, you can use push and move the clay around, and however works for you, use your tools. Okay, so that's looking good. So we'll do another here. Score my coil. Score the surface. I'm going to give it a light sponge. Not too much. These coils are pretty soft still, so just a little scoring helps. Oops. I cut my end off. But, so if you have a long coil, use your arm. You can kind of prop it up like this, like you're holding a snake almost. It helps. And then put it upside down. I scored the bottom, so turn it down. And then I have the end here, so I'm going to start laying it from where that end is all the way around, pressing, up, and then kind of help that, and then score again. Press. And if you feel that it's soft and your coil laying is really wobbly, then you can let it sit and then come back to it. Okay, that's the nice thing about working with clay, is that you can use time to your advantage. It's not like working in hot glass where the heat just goes away and the glass breaks if you don't mold it into the specific shape you need it to be in a certain amount of time. Clay is very forgiving in that way compared to some other materials. So that end's a little dry, so I'm gonna give it a little sponge and wet it and smooth it out. So kind of giving it a light pinch, making sure the form and the shape is okay, making sure that the coils are stuck to each other. They are, and then I want to clean the outside. Let's see how tall this is. Maybe 2.5. Oops. Yep, that's about 2.5. So let's lay one more coil. But I can also, well, we can smooth the inside out before we lay more coils. But if you want to, this is a small enough size that you could lay all your coils first and let it stiffen up a little bit and then come smooth all the inside and outside of your pot. And so smoothing the outside, you can of course use your modeling tool and drag it across or down. And you can see. Okay, and then you can work diagonally, kind of supporting the inside. Or you got your wood rib, a nice one. I like the modeling tool because I feel like I have a little more control and I can see kind of what I'm doing. And then there's your metal rib as well that can do some smoothing. Okay, and then you can put it down. Work on that. Use whatever side that works for you on the tool. So this is starting to have a smooth outside. And the same thing for the outside too. If there's like a bigger divot that you want to fill in, use a tiny coil. And then when the clay's a little softer too, you can press into itself and help fill that gap. And you can do that as you lay your coils if you know that you want to completely smooth the outside. Also, I think sometimes those little pinch marks are really cute. It leaves a nice mark of the hand. Okay, so you can kind of continue and smooth. The pot completely on the outside. And also another thing I didn't mention when you're starting your coil pot, you can actually like have a bigger slab and just, you know, draw your lines on where you want the pot to be, and then lay coils on that and then cut the bottom off afterwards, kind of after you have the foundation made. That works too. Or sometimes I like to leave little extra tab out so that I can kind of pinch it up and fill the bottom foundation and strengthen the connection. So if you have a little excess, then it's easier to like move up and pinch it. I'm gonna fill a little bit of that in. So, okay, we got like a little rough smoothing going on. This can take more work for sure. Just smoothing all this around. Yep. And so after I get like the bigger ridges kind of toned down, that's when I like to use the metal rib or rubber rib and gently smooth out all the pull marks and little cruds that's been created, and fill in pockets. But I think your thumb is pretty much the best tool for finishing touches of smoothing things out. And then when you're working on the pot, kind of keep dabbling with your sponge so that the rims don't dry too fast. Okay. Yep. So this can use a lot more work, but we got a nice start of this. Okay. So this I'm gonna completely smooth out, and this I've smoothed out the inside, and it's been sitting out a little bit, so it's starting to get leather hard, which is nice. And that's when I like to also kind of clean up the outside coils, and not to remove the ridges, but just kind of gently fill in and maybe clean up the lines of the attachments. And the wood tool is nice. Also, I have like score marks that are visible, so I want to wipe that down, and you can easily just wipe it down with a sponge and kind of run your wood modeling tool in between the connections to kind of just compress and clean the lines up. And these lines will be really nice when you glaze your pot, and you'll be able to see the different variation in the glaze with the raised parts of the pot and the grooves where the glaze could puddle gently. Yep, so okay, smooth inside. See? And nice coil outside. Okay? Pretty good, huh? Okay. So we got 2 coil pots here.